My name's Mavis Succi and I'm a member of Horsley Climate Action Network. That's a local group here in Horsley working to try and reduce our carbon footprint, carbon emissions as much as we can. Today we're filming a second film about trees, and this one is focused on trees in and for the community, places where everyone can enjoy them and benefit from them. And I'm here with David Bullock, who lives in Horsley as well and knows a great deal about trees. So I'm going to ask him a few questions to fill us in on some of that. David, if you live in Horsley, you'd be forgiven for thinking that we live in a very densely wooded area. We seem to be surrounded by trees, but that's not the full picture, is it?
In terms of the parish, it's not the full picture. In Gloucestershire, as a county, we've got 14% tree cover, which is about the same the rest of the UK, and has been that way for maybe 1,000 years or even less. But what we see is that we are, in terms of tree cover in Europe, very low. So Slovenia, 45% tree cover. Here, 14% tree cover. In Gloucestershire, 14% tree cover. What sits in Horsley Parish? It's actually lower than that. It's about 10.6% tree cover. What we see, maybe, is when we are in our hamlets and in the village generally, is a great deal of tree cover, but actually much of the parish is actually above the valleys, and in farmland, which is very open, a majority of the parish doesn't have many trees, and we're actually quite low on trees. So even to get to the target for Gloucestershire of 20%, we're not going from 14% to 20%, we're going from less than 11 to 20%. So we've got a way to go.
Yeah. So what kind of things should we be thinking about when we're thinking about planting new trees? And maybe looking after existing trees in our village.
Okay, so the new trees, thinking about where to and where not to plant, and what to plant and what not to plant. Perhaps we should be looking at the whole parish as opposed to just our individual gardens or the places where there are existing trees in our hamlets. There's more space up in farmland or the edges of farmland. We can connect up perhaps with trees and hedgerows, whole landscapes through which wildlife can move more easily if it wants to use trees. And we can also think about what we plant where in terms of community planting. And orchards, for example, are one of the examples of where that could be a good opportunity for people to care communally for trees. Because one of the things we've got to think about is once you plant that tree, you've got to look after it for a long time. Most trees in bad situations, poorly planted, just do not thrive. And even if they're planted in the best situations, maybe up to a third of them die of drought, or they get damaged by voles or deer, or broken by storms and so on. It's a tricky business, and trees need looking after. The only other thing I would say is that of those native trees, some of them will grow, if they're in the right place, very, very tall. And in small gardens, they just won't be appropriate. So we need to think about where do these big trees go if we want them to grow to maturity, be beautiful, great for wildlife, and actually catch carbon all their lives and store that carbon, as opposed to be a source of that carbon by prematurely dying and rotting away, or being cut down and burnt for fuel.
Yes, there's definitely more to it than we think about sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, we're actually standing today in a beautiful community orchard in Upend in Horsley that's looked after by the community. Could you tell us a bit, David, about why are orchards, traditional orchards, so valuable for us?
Well, we're in Gloucestershire, which produces the best apple juice, the best cider and the best perry on the planet. You know that, Mavis. I mean, I took some Gloucestershire apple juice to Herefordshire the other day because I know Herefordshire just doesn't produce anything like as good quality apple juice. Anyway, the point is we do produce lots of great apple juice in the very few old orchards that we've got left. Since the 1970s, so only 50 years ago, we've lost 3/4 of the old orchards in Gloucestershire. That is terrible, given that they are one of our signature landscape features. 3,000 varieties of apples in this country, hundreds in Gloucestershire, and we're losing half of them because they are just becoming redundant. Thankfully, some of them are in this orchard, and it's great to see this as a community orchard. Community orchards definitely win out in terms of bringing people together to care for trees. Partly because they love the trees, partly because they love the activities associated with that. But also you've got some product at the end of the day. You've got apples and pear juice and cider and plums, maybe some nuts as well and this sort of thing. And they're cared for throughout their lives, which could be tens of years in the case of the oldest orchard trees, maybe up to 100 years. So I'm rooting for orchards being great places to lock up carbon and to provide a community approach to locking up carbon and enjoying the beauty of the blossom and the fruit that comes from orchard trees. I'm also rooting for places away from our hamlets in the village where there's open space which we could just fill a little bit of with tree plantings rather than try and force them into, for example, small gardens and big trees, which really is a very difficult match. The tree will eventually have to go because it's too big for the small garden.
Yes, which is a waste and a shame. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
The longer the trees grow, the more they grow into maturity, the more carbon they're going to catch, the more iconic they become, and they could live for a very long time if they're cared for.
Thank you, David. Again, that's a really, really helpful kind of information, I think, for people that are interested in thinking about tree planting in the community. So this is the second video that we're doing, and if you've enjoyed it and found it helpful, you can find more information about the Climate Action Network group on our Facebook page or the Instagram account or our email account, and you can also find out more about Horsley Orchard Project on their website. Thank you.